Welcome into this newest edition of Making the Leap. This one, I can tell you already, I'm going into it biased. I have said that I've had favorite episodes before. This one is going to be my favorite, and I haven't even started doing the show yet.
You might not want to say that. I might be upset the people that are now getting bumped to like second and third. Right?
We've done some great shows and we've had some outstanding guests, but I'm telling you, lights out, far and away, this guest, this story is going to blow your mind. It's just remarkable. And it started, as so many of these shows often do, from the radio show in Kansas City, combing through the news of the day. And I come across a story about a seventh grade boy who leaves his home at night. He runs away, I guess, ends up scaling a water tower in the Kansas City metro area. And Kansas City police end up finding him, locating where he is. And the boy is intent on taking his own life.
Right.
He says before doing so, there's only one person that he wants to speak to. He wants to speak to his school resource officer. That school resource officer, we learned, his name is Jonathan Bransfield. And Deputy Bransfield works for the Clay County, Missouri Sheriff's Department. And I read this story, and I read, by the way, this ends happily. The boy, after a 40-minute conversation, and at the prompting and at the counsel of Deputy Bransfield, he comes down and he's now receiving treatment. We hope and we pray. But the happy upshot to this whole story is the impact that this deputy had on this young man and really an entire family. I asked my producer of the radio show, can we get the deputy on the show? It happened. We had this tremendous interview. And then, like, what I didn't know was how rich and wonderful this interview would be, because the 10, 15 minutes we spent on the air was just the beginning. The deputy and I began to exchange some notes. I learned more about him, and I thought, well, he's got to come on Making the Leap, because there's so much more about him that the Kansas City radio audience didn't even get to know.
Well, and then when you were texting me and I said, okay, I'm going to reach out to him quick, and I talked very, very briefly on the phone and texted you back and said, do you know his kids go to a Christian school? And you were like,
no
nope.
Idea.
And I thought, we've got to. Like, this
if this is not a God thing, then you tell me what it is. Because here's this podcast that exists exclusively to talk about promoting Christian education. And I just wanted to bring in Deputy Bransfield as an idea. Well, let's talk about the struggles kids are having in public school.
School resource officer, those things.
No idea. And he has kids that he has now put in his own life in private Christian education. So without further ado, we welcome to Making the Leap, and we're honored to have Deputy Jonathan Bransfield. Deputy, pleasure, sir.
Thank you all so much for having me.
What an honor to have you.
Just been a treat.
I'm not even sure where to start. And I've done this once. I need to do it again for this audience.
I know. I can start us off.
What I really want to do is retell the story.
I know.
You need to dig into that
and
first.
I will dig into the story, but to start, for people who maybe don't know, tell us what a school resource officer does. Tell us what their primary focus is, how they connect into the schools, because I think that is one of the most impactful pieces of this whole thing.
Yeah, so basically we go through a interview board just like anybody else does for any unit. They have the school district come in, they sit on the interview, they rank people who will be able to, who they think would fit in the best.
Okay.
But in all honesty, I mean, it's just to maintain security and safety in the building. That's also from any outside dangers, that's from inside dangers. But it's being personable and being there as an avenue and as a guideline for students.
So I think that's what I was hoping that you would say, because I think there's always those two pieces. And when people hear school resource officer, I feel like a lot of them think you are there as a protection for the outside. You are there to protect against whatever dangers might be lurking on the outside. But I think the bigger impact, and the one that I think you're having clearly, are the connections that you're having within those school walls. And so knowing that, if you could tell us, I don't want to step on the privacy of the boy that's involved at all. I don't ever want to encroach on anything there. But if you could just share a little bit about what happened the night that you were called to go help, to go do what it is that school resource officers do, which is to bring that connection full force.
Yeah. So, and I also have to get I have to let other people know, including students, is that, I get asked all the time, are you a real cop? It's like, yes, I am a deputy sheriff. I have arresting powers. I can go stop cars if I want.
You wear the uniform in school?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I am in uniform the entire time that I'm at school.
Okay.
The kids don't see me usually without my vest on. Sometimes I'll take it off and go play basketball or, some kickball or something like that with them, just kind of interact. But
may I ask, just because I want to, and I don't want to linger on this because I want to get back to her question, but could I just sidestep and ask, in terms of presence in schools, I hear a lot of public schools are debating right now having at least one of you in every public school in every district. Is that the way we're going? Is that best in your view?
That's best. There's a lot of things that go into it. There's got to be funding. There's got to be things that you got to be able to, give salaries a little bit too. So my salary is based out of the sheriff's office, but we also have a little bit extra money from the school district for doing, off-duty work as well for the school district.
Okay.
So every Friday night we do football games. We're making sure that so anything that involves schools, we are there to
trying to have a
help.
presence.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it's ultimately your relationship in this capacity that comes into play with this story. So please take it away.
So I actually I had gotten in bed and I put a sleep mode on my phone so I don't get disrupted at night. And I'd only had that on for a few days and my phone just kept going off, and it was my work phone. So I had a couple of Kansas City numbers that I did not know, and I usually do not answer phone calls that I don't know. So then I started getting calls from deputies. One of the really good buddies of mine that was working that night, I called him back. He said, "Hey, Kansas City's trying to get a hold of you. We need you to respond like immediately." So he said to call the number back. So I called the number back, and it was the Kansas City Police Department captain that was on scene.
Wow.
And he said, "Hey, we've got a situation down here involving somebody that knows you and has asked you personally to respond down to the scene. Can you come?" And without any hesitation at all, I said, "Absolutely. Give me 25 minutes and I'll be there."
Did you recognize the name? Did they give you the name of the student?
He did. Just the first name, and I immediately knew.
You knew who it was?
I immediately knew who it was.
Did you know this kid is troubled?
Not to the point of where he took it.
Okay.
But I did know that he was having some struggles.
Okay.
And you knew that because he confided in you at school?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I made it a point and him and I, it was kind of a running joke, was every morning that he would come in, he would see me in the hallway, give each other a high five, shake, give each other a hug and say, "Hey man, have a good day." And that's just kind of how our day went before he left. "Hey man, hope you have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow."
And there's such value in that, because when you have a kid coming into the classroom or into a hallway or into the building, a lot of times I think any person that is in tune can see like, oh, maybe not having the best day right now, or struggling. Like I think there's complete intent in that 100%
What
from
were
the
you
get-go.
thinking? You get the call that he wants to talk to you. Are youth? I mean, I don't know I guess you go into professional mode. You're not thinking about anything other than getting to the scene, I know. But are you having any kind of internal dialogue about what might be waiting for you?
I honestly, the first thing out of my mouth was, "God, let me make it on time." Gosh. And if this is what I have to do, then give me the strength and give me the words in order to change an outcome.
And to be there on time, to be there before,
I made it there in pretty good time.
I'm glad.
he wanted you there. Did he tell you why, or did the officers tell you why?
So I got on scene, and the captain just kind of briefed me on what was going on. He said, "You're welcome to go on scene," and there was a couple other officers there, and they let me know that they had negotiators en route. So I went, and I immediately put eyes on him, and knew I needed to start building this dialogue now. But it wasn't hard because I had built this dialogue with him every day.
Is he on a ladder?
And where I was going to say, where was he?
He was actually on a very thin ring on a pole.
How high up?
He was I think what they said was he was approximately 115, 120 feet up.
And you're communicating with him how?
I was pretty much shouting, if not just trying to, and every time that I would say something, I was like, "Can you hear me?"
Okay.
And he would respond.
Okay.
So I immediately got there, and as soon as he heard my voice, he was able to know that it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wanted to tell me, "Hey man, I just want to say thank you for everything you did for me, and I just want to tell you goodbye." And, I don't want you to see this. And I said, well, it's just like everything else that you've called on me this year, is that once you call on me, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. So I'm not going anywhere.
Wow. I think there is something that is so powerful. I think kids know what they need even when they don't want to say what they need. And
Sure.
I think there is really something about the fact that he knew he needed you. He needed somebody. He needed you, and to call you and just, he didn't want you to see it, but he wanted you to be there.
Well, and the greatest thing about it is, and this is what, after I had a conversation with my brother about all this whole incident, is that he wanted to make sure that he knew that he didn't want a uniform. There were uniforms there. He wanted you. Mm-hmm. And that's something that needs to be understood within myself, was that he didn't want a uniform. There were uniforms all over the place. He wanted me.
Mm-hmm.
This dialogue went back and forth. You're yelling, he's yelling for how long? 40 minutes, I think
About
you said?
40. It felt like hours, but it was approximately 40 to 45 minutes.
And so you were on the ground.
I was on the ground,
and
yeah.
he was up.
Yeah. Neck muscles were a little sore after that.
I was just thinking, like, that's a lot of, that's physical stamina. That really is. It's not the emotional stamina aside. I think being in a tense situation like that, there's such a toll that is being taken through that. And I think that's important to just keep in mind.
You told of the moment when he finally descends. I thought this was uniquely powerful. What happened when he finally comes down the ladder and touches the ground?
So when he was coming down on the rings, he was coming down on the rings, and it was a pretty far stretch. I mean, he would come down, and then every time that he would take a step down, he would say one step at a time, and I would immediately follow it up with one day at a time. And that was just reassurance for him, knowing that you're sitting here coming down a step at a time, but I'm telling you that we're going to take it one day at a time.
Right.
We're not going to get everything figured out right then and there. But then when he got to that last ring, and we had all, several people were there, several officers were there, and we just kept getting closer every time that he would take a step down. And so once he hit the ground, he just kind of put his head down, took a couple of steps towards me, and I just wrapped him up and just gave him a hug. And he just lost. I mean, he sobbed, he cried, and said he was sorry. And I just told him how proud of him I was of him. I just hugged him, and I just told him that I was proud of him, because in that moment, I was extremely proud of him, because he just overcame something that a lot of people can't.
Right, because I think at this point there is an easy, quote unquote, way out, and he comes back. He comes back from that, and not only coming physically, literally down and back from that. There, like you said, there is that road ahead of him that is going to be, it's immense coming up in front of him to go ahead, like you said, that one day at a time. Mm-hmm. And I think doing that without judgment, without the worry of what all else is involved in this, the paperwork, the day-to-day, like all the things that are involved. I think just telling him this is what's important. You just took this
also
step.
Just telling him that, everybody's battling something.
Right.
You're not alone.
Right.
And it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
I asked you this, I think parents or guardians, were they on scene or not at that time?
No, they were over at a different location.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any contact, as of this recording, there's been some time, but not much. Have you had any contact with the boy since?
I have not. I just know that he is in a in-house facility getting treatment.
Do you anticipate that you would sometime at some point, or is that not necessarily protocol?
So it's not necessarily protocol. It's almost like once we've done with a call, we chalk it up and we kind of move on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that the family's hurting right now. I know they're having a hard time, so I like to give them their privacy. And
Sure.
I also like to make sure that there is some time that has been gone by. That way I'm not keeping a wound freshly open. Mm-hmm. They need time to heal as well from this.
Absolutely.
And so that's where it is.
This became a citywide, in the Kansas City metro area, it became huge. It's now gone regional, national. Right. You and I exchanged some notes. You said, your bosses said, clear the runway. There's going to be a lot of phone calls. I mean, you've probably had a great deal of interest.
Yeah, this has been one of the biggest shared stories that Clay County Sheriff's Facebook page has ever had, and I think as of this morning, it was over 4,200 shares.
You know, and
on
I think a
Facebook.
lot about why that is. And there's such a pervasive sadness among so many kids
The worst.
that we know. It is sad to an extent that there is any child, any human that feels that is the only way out. However, I feel like this is such a commentary on God, on hope, on connections, on communication, that I think that is the bigger draw to people, that
Sure.
there's an alternate outcome available in any scenario that feels impossible. And I think people are drawn to that. And when I first read that story and I sent it on to him right away, we had an experience at our previous, where we used to live, where the outcome was not good, where there was a kid, a high schooler, who ran out, got to a bridge, and jumped before anybody could
Sure.
get there. And it was devastating. And when I read this, I just kept thinking, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what an amazing opposite. How wonderful for his family that they can do what they need to do. It's hopeful.
Yeah, and what is unique about your position, Deputy, is that you see the lost. You knew this to some degree, and maybe not to the extent we experienced, or you experienced ultimately, but you're seeing this, which is why I was most interested to talk to you. It's not that you were just law enforcement on the scene. You had a personal investment, and you're seeing the sadness and the despair in these kids, and that's why you're so unique. You worked a scene, but you experienced the sadness, and that beforehand. So I was wondering if you could enlighten us a little bit. What are you seeing in school that's causing this kind of sadness in young people?
I mean, everybody is on social media. I mean, everybody has a phone. Everybody, I mean, just kids that, I mean, I didn't get my first phone until I was 16.
Yeah.
And even then I couldn't text or anything like that. I mean, I used it for emergency purposes only. But now everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has social media. Everybody has, but even when we're seeing, fights in buildings or anything like that, people are much more apt to pick up a phone and start recording than jump in and help.
Then stop it. Mm-hmm.
And so that's a lot of it too, and just the disregard of just, it's almost if they don't care about their fellow man, it's just what's going to give them views.
Mm-hmm.
I asked you about this, is where I want to get a little personal with you, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
you share only what you'd like. I learned about you that you have 2 young sons. We've since learned, before we started recording this show, that you yourself came up through a private Catholic education. Is that right?
I did, yes.
So you now work as a resource officer in a public school setting, and I guess, could I ask you, if you don't mind, if you can't or don't in your professional capacity, don't want to, that's all right. But I'm just curious, do you see your coming up in Catholic school, now being stationed as a resource officer in a public school? And I've since learned about you, if you don't mind me sharing, that your boys are now enrolled in a private Christian school. Why? Why did you make that decision? Do you see any difference in your upbringing in the Catholic tradition in a Catholic school and the public
What
school
you're
you
seeing in
serve?
schools.
Sure.
It's a long question.
So a lot of it is, so the difference is I feel like it's a different time, for sure. But with my boys, they were in public school and they had a lot of trouble focusing. A lot of trouble. There was a lot of distractions. There were a lot of things that, kids weren't doing what they were asked to do and things. So, and my oldest son, he, I talked to him every night on the phone. I'm just like, buddy, what's wrong? And he's like, I just can't focus. And I mean, he's a straight A student. He loves school, but he's intelligent. He's an intelligent young man. And he just said, Dad, I can't focus. And then once their mom and I decided that it was time to put them in, private school. And then we had actually had some connections with that private school, and they were accepted. They were able to get enrolled. And ever since then, I mean, they come home and they're just like, Dad, we had Bible class. I got verses. And my youngest son, he's 7. And just the amount that he retained on a Bible verse. And I asked him, what was your Bible verses, this week? And he would just tell me a book with the chapter and the the verse, and he would recite it for me. And I'm like, "Are you reading that?" And he's like, "No, Dad, I remember it." And it's just things like that where it's just they take it and they put it back into a intimate setting of putting God first.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? I asked you this in the radio interview, and I know you and I've since talked about this a little bit. You said you were not, and I understand because you're a professional, and when you're got your work hat on, you're doing your work. With some time to reflect, this young boy you talked down off a water tower, how have you applied that to your boys, your own sons, who are, by the way, 9 and 7?
9 and 7, yes, sir.
Is there any practical application in this whole thing for you and your boys, do you think, down the road or now?
Well, I can tell you it's paying attention to what it is that they're spending their time on, but at the same time not being influenced by the world. And I think we're too much living for the world instead of living for what our purpose is. But I tell you that incident happened on Wednesday and Friday. Like I was telling you before, I'm assistant coach for my son's baseball team, and just seeing them, and then my youngest son comes up and runs up and just gives me a hug, and I had a pretty cool photo taken of me and my son, and I didn't know that it was a picture opportunity, but man, just the face that I was making in that picture, it was hard not to get emotional whenever I hugged my boys after that. Yeah.
Do you again, I don't mean to be personal, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but I don't think you're embarrassed by this because you shared it with me first. It's probably no small coincidence, not a coincidence at all, actually, that you'd shared with me just, a week prior you'd become a newly baptized believer in Christ?
Yeah, so I had made the decision. So I go to Restoration Church in Liberty.
Okay.
And I had talked to my pastor about getting baptized. And I was baptized back in 2014, but I did it all for the wrong reasons. I did it all for, I'm in a new church, I want to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
And until it was like, man, I'm tired of doing the lip service. I'm tired of doing the things of, I'm just going to tell everybody that I'm a believer. I want to show the one and only that I'm his.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it turned into, was I want to be baptized. And I went through some steps, and I went through a process, and man, it was, I've watched the video probably 9 or 10 times now, just the whole thing. And it was just, I got baptized on April 30th, and it was just amazing how I truly believe that the old me is dead and gone, and the new creation that was brought up out of the water is 100% the person I was always supposed to be.
He mentioned this, I really don't believe too often anymore in coincidences at all, really. And so I think hearing that and knowing what happened just a short time later, knowing that you've been on a path, knowing you've been on a path with your own kids, moving them from, where there's clearly worldly influences that are just not good, to now, I see that, and I just think, well, of course, God's not surprised, right, by any of this. He's orchestrating all of it. But as humans, I just think, oh my gosh, to put you in that position, and then have, I would say, being in a faith testing position, just not even 2 weeks later, probably, that's pretty incredible. And that shows a lot of, I think, what God is doing in you and what you now can do for others.
And
all glory goes to Him.
Well,
Right, 100%.
But in your
100%.
work in law enforcement, do you see it as a ministry opportunity or no?
Well, in all honesty, I didn't before, until I start really diving in and understanding that, I thought, being that cool verse, the Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they, will be called the children of God. It was stamped everywhere. I've been in law enforcement for 11 years, but you don't really know what that truly means until you truly start living it out. And my girlfriend and I, she is deep rooted, and man, she has helped me a lot. And I 100% believe that God brought us together for His glory, and that's 100% fact. And the fact that He has given me the tools and has sent me out on my way to sit there and go, now go do exactly what I've called you to do.
Be a peacemaker. I
Right.
mean, you were able to speak peace, I think, into a kid that needed peace, and not just that night. I don't think he would have
Sure.
called you, had there not been other moments happening, daily, weekly occurrences prior to that. And I think our schools they need that. They need the people that can do that. And not that you were running around each day in the hallway speaking of God with this boy.
Sure.
I'm not saying that 100%, but just knowing that I think that's God working in the background, knowing that he put you where that boy was for a reason, for that purpose. That is faith, and that is God, and that doesn't have to be. I think we need people like that in our schools.
Oh my gosh.
100%, not just as the resource officer, but as the teacher. And it's hard because you can't speak of faith, you can't speak of God openly, but they need to be there. I think we need to have you
and
guys
it's just
there.
also understanding that God calls us all to do something special.
Right.
And he's called me. I mean, this is 100% where I should have been, but he knew that I needed time to get there.
Mm-hmm.
He knew I needed time to really express and expose him through me. I was used as a vessel that night, and that's what I truly believe, is that God used me as a vessel to shine a light on something that was so dark, but at the same time, but just being compassionate and understanding that you can be compassionate with youth and understand that that's okay.
Yes.
And I know that I speak for, and I work with some of the best law enforcement officials and some of the best law enforcement personnel out there. Our unit, we all take very good pride in being who we are to these students. But I also work with I worked with a lot of great staff at my school that really do care about the education of the students.
We know she was a public school teacher for years. We've had interaction just this year with some remarkable people in public education. I do often wonder, when you are inside the belly of the beast every day, I call it the beast just because culturally, secularly speaking,
So
it's
hard,
rough. It's rough for even great teachers. What are you seeing? Because we do this show with the idea that a lot of people will watch this and think about perhaps moving their child to a private Christian education. Maybe this is too direct a question for someone in your position, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would you say to parents who might be considering that themselves, or do you? Well, I mean, you clearly moved your own children into a Christian education.
It's just whatever you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable with keeping your kids in public school, then keep them in public school. If you want to try out private school and see what that kind of does for them. Every family's different, and every family has their own strengths and has their own weaknesses. So I just know that in my position,
Are you seeing things that should bother us as parents collectively in public school?
I think all law enforcement see a lot of bad things that should bother everybody else, just because I'm used to it. But
Right.
But in the halls of our schools in particular.
I mean, it's just like I said, it's one of those things where, and I know that there's a lot of things that go into it. Nothing's censored anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the world is just right there in your face from a very early age, and just nobody censors it anymore. So it's constantly there, and the good, the bad, the ugly, the happy, the sad, everything is there at a very early age. But I can remember seeing some things when I was a kid.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember being in private school. Mm-hmm. And seeing some things as well.
Sure.
To where it was just kind of like, man, where does this end? Where does this start? Where does it end? And just kind of going from there. But just really just talking to your kids and seeing if they're comfortable and where they're at, not just with their friends, but in the environment that they're in.
May I be personal and ask? You mentioned that you and your now ex-wife.
Yes. Yes.
Because of that dynamic, I wonder, was there any disagreement about the way forward for your sons now that you're no longer married?
In terms of school.
Yeah,
It's school, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so
not to be personal, but
yeah,
I wonder
no.
that can be a dynamic I would assume that comes into play when
Oh,
parents are trying to
absolutely.
decide that.
And
Yeah.
so I took it under, and I was like, if this is what's going to be best for them, then let's do it.
Yeah.
For sure.
May I also pry and ask?
Yeah.
I assume most of us aren't, but I know you deputies aren't rolling in dough. yet. You should be, but you're probably not. Everyone that thinks about this thinks about the money and the cost. Is it a struggle?
Well, so I was told in the academy, and that was back in 2010. You don't join law enforcement to get rich.
Yeah, right.
It's like
You do it
teach
because
here.
you have you do it because you have a calling and because you love it.
Yeah.
And I said at a very early age, and I had it. My father, who has since passed, he passed in 2017. I can remember him telling me the story of when I graduated the academy. He says, "Man, I can still remember when you brought a paper home in kindergarten with a note from your teacher that says he's going to do great things because he already said he wants to be a policeman."
Wow.
Oh.
So I decided at 5 years old
Wow.
that I was going to be a policeman, and I just knew that's what I was called to do. I've always had a servant heart.
And so with that servant heart, often, like we said, does not come a paycheck that allows you to just make financial decisions saying we're
Sure.
going to now pay for 2 kids coming into a private school, because that's not cheap.
So when you hear
depending.
people say, "I
So
can't afford that," that's nice for you, but I can't afford
how,
to
what
do
do
it.
you, how do you
What would
answer
say?
that?
Yeah, it's just there's assistance out there. There is assistance out there that I know is offered.
Yep.
So, like I said, the money is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody that is out of law enforcement that is sitting there saying, "Man, you guys need to be paid, a lot more." I would agree, but at the same time, we would still do the exact same job.
Yep.
I started off making, $25,000 a year
Mm-hmm.
being a patrolman, to where now I'm a little bit more than that, and all I can say is it's on the up and up, and we're just going to keep going.
And you're obviously you're doing what you need because you're able to pay for what your kids need. Like, you're able
Sure.
to meet this need for
Sure.
a school change. You're able
Right.
to do these things.
And not a doubt in your mind that will change. They're young. I
Right.
mean, so
They're
they've
Oh,
got
yeah.
a lot of school ahead of them yet.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you're going to see it through all the way to
Gonna
high
see
school.
it. Yeah,
As
gonna
far
see
as
it
you
through
know,
because
yeah.
their school goes K through 12.
Okay, that's great.
So it's a really good atmosphere for them to be in.
That's amazing. I just keep coming back to a lot. Like, number one, you said, I think there's some important, key takeaways, that you're the vessel. I agree with that 100%. I think when anytime somebody is in a situation like that, I just have to believe that God is in them, with them, through them, beside them, the whole time. But I just think the path that you have been on, I think that just shows where God is in everything. That you had opportunities in a Catholic school, maybe took some of it in. I did too. I was in Catholic school. I some of it, yes, no, some, and then I continued on with my life and kind of did my thing, and then weaved my way back, and here we are now, where I wouldn't have expected it. And I think that's the second piece, is that God has that plan for all of us, has the plan for that young boy coming off that water tower. And I just think that's huge for all of us to recognize that there is that plan for all of our kids, no matter what situation that they're in. And I don't know, I really just commend the people that, like you, that are doing these tough things in these tough situations that we don't know how they're going to end. We don't know how they're going to turn out.
Yeah, and one of the great things about this young man that I will share from that night was he just kept saying he was scared. And I said, "You're scared because you do have a purpose. You're scared because you don't want this to happen, because you know that you and I both know that we've got a reason why you're here. You got a reason why you're having second thoughts. You got a reason why you're doing this. So let's do it. Let's figure it out together." And there were a lot of tears. There were some upset moments, but at the same time, it was keeping him engaged. It was keeping him engaged and understanding that I've never lied to you once, and I'm not going to start doing it now. So even in your pivotal moment, I'm still not gonna blow smoke. I'm still not gonna tell you what you want to hear. I'm gonna be honest with you. And so that's when I shared a lot of things, some personal things about myself, and how I had somebody else's story help me during my struggle, and that now I'm hoping that my story is going to help you out as well. And then you can take this and you can quarterback this thing from here, and you can have a story that is going to help somebody else and reach somebody else.
You're a young man. I don't know how long you've been in law enforcement, but I don't know. God forbid you don't have to cross this path again. But is this the most impactful moment of your law enforcement career thus far? I know you've got more career ahead of you, but
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I've been a cop for 11 years, and I've seen a lot of good things. I've seen a lot of bad things, but this moment sticks out to me because it was somebody that I knew personally, and it was somebody that I was able to empower him, and knowing that this was his decision, that he now. It's not because of me. You made the decision to come down. I just helped you along the way.
I know you can't presume to know this boy's family dynamic truly, what's going on inside their home behind closed doors. You said he has some kind of guardians, I don't know, parents, a parent. What do parents need to know? Is there anything you saw or see in a boy like this that parents should be aware of or more aware of or do better?
So the biggest thing that I see is there's a lot of things that people want that easy fix, but with this family, it's not that. They have literally exhausted every avenue, and I've continued to exhaust every avenue, and that's why I've also told them that I would be an advocate for them as well. Anything that they need, anything that he needs, I'm going to be here for you guys as much as I can be. So it's just really, and the first thing that people want to say is, well, let's blame the parents. Right. And these parents have gone above and beyond and continue to go above and beyond. They're very involved. They're very active. They're very much, they want to get him back to being okay.
So he wasn't even angry or upset with them?
No.
It wasn't about a relationship with his parents at all? But they did not know, to your knowledge, the depth of his struggle?
Not to my knowledge, but at the same time, I don't have that information.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's something that I'm glad you brought up, because I when I read stories like this on social media, there is that jump to, what do the parents do? Why weren't they there? Who's letting their kid run around anyway at 9:30 at night? Like, come on. Like, that's those kinds of things I get really frustrated at, because kids are kids. They're going to make the choices that they're going to make.
Sure.
But at the same time, that's a lot of parents don't really think they have to sit in front of the house at 9 o'clock at night to make sure someone's not running it. Like you said, they're not looking, they're involved. They're doing what they need to be doing. And so I think that is also the point to make, or the statement to make to people, is that we're sitting here in a place that we don't know. We don't know what's happening behind those closed doors. We don't know that they've exhausted all kinds of avenues. We don't know the work that they're putting in.
Well, and another thing that I see also is that I have these kids for 8 hours a day.
Sure.
After that, I don't have them until the next day when I see them again.
Right.
All I can do is try to invest in them as much as I can while I have them.
Right.
Here's my punchline, and you correct me if I'm wrong. What that boy didn't have, and you would hope that these kids could find or experience, and maybe Christian school gives them that best avenue. Maybe this is something your boys are exposed to. This boy you talked down off a water tower had no hope. And you would want that all our children understand that there's hope in Christ.
Absolutely.
Maybe he didn't know that. Maybe he doesn't know that yet. And I pray he finds that. But
and that could be a falsehood on me for not bringing that to him, or even asking him if he does. So that's something that I don't do, is ask. I don't ask people.
Well, and you can't. Can
usually
you in the
no.
hallways of school?
I mean,
you
usually
can't.
no. We have to keep it to the point of, if you're having a rough day, just come and talk to me about it. We'll see what we can do to figure it out.
Right.
Do you feel compelled to ever share that? I mean, I know you're a sheriff.
There's professionalism.
You're a sheriff's deputy. You're in a school, a public school. I understand all the reasons you shouldn't and can't.
Right.
Do you ever feel compelled to anyway?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I did share. I mean, this isn't the only kid. I mean, I've had several that have sat across from me in my office, that have sat there, and I'm like, that I'll tell them the same things, because I look at a lot of these kids that even if they're not troubled, I still want you, if you're having a bad day, come and talk to me, because that's another reason why we're here. But that's another reason why I say, like, I make them see me. I don't make them see the uniform. I choose to put this uniform on every single day. I didn't ever have anybody come up to me and say, hey, I think you'd be a great cop. You should come be a cop. I chose to do this, and I chose to be in the schools. Every single one of our members in our unit all chose to be out here.
That's awesome.
Is this how you would see your career trajectory, staying in a school setting, or what do you think?
Yeah, I hope to promote within this unit, and I hope to stay in this unit for the remainder of my career.
Does your school
This
district
is where my niche is.
does your school district have an officer in every school?
Yeah, so actually
currently?
we have 2 deputies in every high school.
2 in every
Yeah,
high school.
we have
Okay.
we have 1 in every middle school.
Okay.
And then we have so our school zone is separated into north and south.
Okay.
So in the north, we have a sergeant over the north, we have a sergeant over the
Okay.
south.
Okay.
We have a corporal over the north, we have a corporal over the south, and then we have a rover, and they respond to elementary schools.
Okay.
We've also partnered up, North Kansas City School District has partnered up with the company called Strategos, and they teach, lockout, take out, and get out to public schools, to private schools. I mean, they do everything. It's international. And we've partnered up with them to put a armed security officer in every one of our buildings, every one of our elementary schools. And their sole purpose is to make sure that things that our Sandy Hook, our Nashville shootings,
active
everything
shooters.
else that do not, they do not enter to come into North Kansas City knowing that they're not going to be able to come in without being met with force.
And you working in the county, that's in concert with municipal,
Yes, sir.
so you'll do that together.
And not every district in our the Northland area, they don't. Do they all function differently?
Yes. So North Kansas City School District functions an entirely different way than, say, Liberty or Kearney or anything like that. So
Okay.
North Kansas City is their own entity, just like every other.
So every school district has their own choice for how they want to implement a program utilizing school.
As far as I know, yes.
This is where I would
officers.
broaden it out. I guess we're straying a little bit from the story at hand, but while we've got you, why not? The notion of school security, as far as you're concerned, this is your forte. Are school districts nationwide best served to have at least one officer in every school? Would that be your preference?
Well, I mean, that to me, yes. However, you have to go with what the budget is. You have to go
Sure.
with the manpower.
Wave a magic wand. Let's say in
You
a
know.
perfect world, every building should have what?
In a perfect world, everybody should have a law enforcement officer inside their building.
At least,
least
one.
one.
At least one. And that's just because I feel like that is, you see a patrol car sitting outside of a school building, that's a deterrent.
Sure.
That's going to be like, okay, I don't want to go to that school, so I'm going to go to somewhere else.
And I think that's more of a deterrent than a sign on a window saying,
Absolutely.
"Don't bring your weapons." I mean, that's
Absolutely.
just a common sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, like I said, and all this is my opinion.
Sure.
Well, sure.
So-
Sure. No, we're not. No,
But that,
we're
and
not.
you
yeah.
would say that of, by the way, let's talk about that. Christian school,
Public school,
3 day a week, public
Right.
school, any kind of setting where there are kids, would you say that for every facility?
that they
Yes.
should have somebody.
I mean, I really do believe that school resource officers, they do more than just keep people out.
Mm-hmm.
They maintain the building. They invest in these kids, and some of these kids don't have anybody that they can turn to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why not be that for them?
Well, and like we said earlier too, we don't know. I don't care if it's a Christian school. I don't care if it's a public school. You just don't know. You do not know what's happening all the time in
Right.
someone else's home. And so, like
Right.
you said, that there might be 2 parents in the home. There might be going to church on Sunday, but maybe there's something else going on in the background, and a kid needs an outlet. They need a person to go to. And I feel like I think police officers just carry that authoritative piece that maybe is needed for a kid, regardless of whether
Sure.
it's a Christian school or a public school. And do you carry a gun with you on a daily basis when you're in the schools?
Oh yeah, I'm in full
So you're
uniform.
armed. What
Yep.
do you say to the people that say there's absolutely we do not need to have a gun in school? We could have an officer, we could have personnel, dads just in the hallways. What do you say to the person that says you don't have to have a gun?
So I have actually come across this, and I just asked them, wouldn't you rather have a gun to meet a gun? Or would you rather me be here just as a presence, but that automatically makes me an easy target? Why not take out the person that has sheriff written on their back first, knowing that he's unarmed, before I do anything else?
I'm glad
So-
to hear you say that.
So
because
it is one of those
important.
things where you meet force with force, and that's it. That's a law enforcement tool. It's a law enforcement saying that we've said long before I ever became a law enforcement officer. You meet force with force, but why not be prepared, and why not be ready for when that wolf howls at the door and it's time to go to work?
You you've now had a few days since this incident happened. I would imagine you've gotten calls, requests, emails, anything of note or that was notable to you in conversation since. Anybody that's corresponded with you, any testimony people have shared personally. I imagine lots of people have interacted with you for various reasons.
Yeah, my phone went went haywire there for a few days. But I kept, and it's hard for me to understand where people are coming from on this, because I keep getting called a hero. I keep getting called an angel. I keep getting called these things. And I'm just like, man, I'm just Jonathan Bransfield. I'm doing what I'm called to do. But I wouldn't be able to do it without giving glory to the one that put me in this position. That's God alone. And so I've had several people just thank me. I've had several people come up to me, and I've had several people reach out. I've gotten so many different friend requests on Facebook from people that I have absolutely no idea who they are. And I apologize. I don't accept friend requests from people that I don't know. But it's definitely one of those things where I've never been in this type of spotlight before. But God calls us to be a light in the darkness. And so maybe this story is just hopefully shedding some light on the good that can come out of all of this. And not this that I was told that this hasn't just touched the Kansas City metro area. This has touched the nation and parts of the world. And I'm just sitting here going, wow, and I don't have really any other words other than wow. Yeah. And just because I was just being me.
Your testimony is just getting started. I have a funny feeling. I imagine the people whose paths you cross professionally and personally, I would imagine you probably have the opportunity to share your testimony and your witness with colleagues, I would imagine, down the road, if you haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just one of those things where I'm never going to accept the title of being a hero. Yeah. I'm never going to accept the title of being an angel. I'm going to accept the title, and that's what he gave me. Yeah. And that's Jonathan Bransfield. I am a school resource deputy for the Clay County, Missouri Sheriff's Office, and that's what I am.
Well, we will continue to pray for you, pray for the kids whose lives I think you will impact down the road, for the teachers that you will come in contact with. Obviously, pray for your safety among all else, because I think that's the biggest
and the
piece.
Humanity that you offer, frankly, the human face you give to law enforcement in this story is also
which is
really
so
important.
needed.
I don't know that enough people, particularly in the politicized world in which we live, we don't get to see a human face very often. Thank you, Deputy, very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you here in the studio.
I appreciate the offer of prayers. I appreciate you guys having me on, and it means a lot. So thank you.
Send us your thoughts about this episode of Making the Leap. If you want to reach out, you can do it in a bunch of different ways. Facebook, right? Yeah,
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So Facebook and Instagram, you can contact us at Making the Leap Podcast. Twitter is making_the_leap podcast. Email always is a wonderful tool. hello@makingtheleappodcast.com. Any of those we will respond to. Download our episodes. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe. Share. I think this is an episode maybe to share with somebody who maybe just needs to hear good news. The good news. The Lord's good news. I think this is it. This is probably, of all the things we've talked about, one that exemplifies God is working in our schools, in all our schools. He's working behind the scenes in ways we don't even know. So definitely share this episode with anyone you see fit, and we will see you next week.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.